The customer who knew my schedule. I noticed the receipt printer first. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even wrong exactly. It just made a single soft click behind me at 2:17 a.m., like it had fed a line of paper through and then thought better of it. There was no one in the store. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they always did on overnights. The coffee warmers gave off that burnt, bitter smell that never really leaves the place. Outside, the highway was empty, except for the occasional semi rolling through in the distance. I was alone, leaning on the counter halfway through a podcast, when the printer made that small mechanical adjustment. I turned around and stared at it for a few seconds. Nothing printed. The register screen was blank. No transaction open. No error message. I told myself machines do that sometimes. Temperature shifts, system refresh, whatever. I reset the receipt roll just in case and went back to the counter. That was the first time I saw him. He walked in about 5 minutes later. Average height, early 40s maybe. Clean jacket. Not dressed like someone who'd been on the road long. He didn't look tired. He didn't look in a hurry either. He went straight to the back cooler and came up with a small bottle of apple juice. Not a soda, not beer. Apple juice. He placed it on the counter, already holding exact change in his hand. I remember that part clearly. $2.37. Bills folded flat. Coins already counted out in his palm. I scanned the bottle. $2.37. He didn't say anything at first. Just watched the register screen like he was waiting for confirmation. When I told him the total, he handed me the cash before I finished the sentence. I gave him his receipt. He didn't take it. He just nodded once and walked out. That was it. He came back the next night. Same time. Within 10 minutes of 2:20 a.m. Same bottle. Same exact cash. I worked Sunday through Thursday overnights, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'd been on that shift for about 6 months. You get used to patterns. Truckers at certain times, factory guys around 4:45. The woman who bought scratch-offs every Wednesday. But this guy didn't feel like a pattern at first. He felt precise. Third night, he spoke. "Quiet tonight," he said while I scanned the juice. "It usually is," I told him. He nodded like he already knew that. He paid. Same amount. Same folded bills. When he turned to leave, he paused and said, "You take trash out around 3, right?" It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't friendly either. Just a statement. "Sometimes," I said. He nodded again. Then he left. I stood there longer than I needed to. Most regulars pick up small details. You see someone enough, you learn their routine. That's normal. But I didn't recognize him from before that week, and I definitely didn't remember telling him about the trash. The next night, he came in again. "You guys fixing the camera system?" he asked. I hadn't told anyone that. Our manager had mentioned in a group text that the DVR was being updated remotely overnight. "Why?" I asked. He glanced up toward the dome camera over the register. "Just looks different." It didn't. I felt something shift then. Not fear exactly, just awareness, like a low-grade pressure behind my eyes. "How'd you know it was being updated?" I asked. He shrugged. "Guess." He left with the apple juice. I started watching the clock after that. 2:12, 2:15, 2:18. Headlights would roll into the lot, slow, deliberate. He'd park at the far pump even though he never pumped gas. Walk in. Juice. Exact change. Minimal words. Every time he made one comment about my routine. "You eat around 1, right? Back door sticks sometimes. Cold in here tonight." Things you could guess. Maybe. Except for the trash. He mentioned it again one night. "You go out the side door now instead of the back." That was true. The back door alarm had been acting up, so I'd started using the side exit near the ice freezer. I hadn't told anyone outside the store. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I just started feeling watched in a way that didn't feel personal. It felt observational. One Wednesday, my manager called me around 1 a.m. "Hey, can you swap tomorrow? Jake wants your Thursday overnight." I didn't care. Overtime was overtime. So I worked Wednesday. Thursday night, Jake worked. Friday afternoon, I came in early to drop something off and caught Jake in the break room. "Anything weird last night?" I asked casually. "Like what?" "Just weird customers." He shook his head. "Dead all night. Didn't see anyone after midnight." That didn't sit right. "Did a guy come in around 2? Apple juice. Cash?" "Nope." I didn't say anything else. Saturday night I wasn't scheduled, but around 2:10 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the empty store, so I drove down there. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street, lights off, and watched. At 2:18 a.m., headlights pulled into the lot. Same car, dark sedan, parked near pump 6. The engine shut off. He didn't get out. The store lights were on. Jake was inside, probably scrolling on his phone. The man stayed in the car. At 2:25, he stepped out, but he didn't go to the door. He walked toward the side of the building, toward the trash enclosure. He stood there, just standing, looking at the store. Jake never came outside. No trash run, no interaction. The man remained there until 2:41. Then he got back in his car and left. I stayed parked for another 10 minutes before I drove home. The next night was my shift again. 2:20 a.m., he walked in. Same apple juice, same folded bills. "Slow night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He looked at me for a second longer than usual. "You weren't here Thursday." It wasn't a question. "No," I said. He nodded. "Figured." "How?" I asked before I could stop myself. He held my gaze, calm, neutral. "You weren't taking the trash out." Something about the way he said it made it clear that wasn't the reason. I let the silence stretch. "You come here when I'm not working?" I asked. He didn't answer. He slid the cash forward. I didn't pick it up. "I checked," I said. "You didn't come inside." He gave the smallest smile. Not amused, just acknowledging. "I don't always need to," he said. I didn't process that right away. My brain wanted a cleaner sentence. "What does that mean?" I asked. He finally took the receipt this time, folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he said, "You think I come here for you?" It wasn't mocking. It wasn't kind. It was factual. "I don't," I said. He tilted his head slightly, like I'd misunderstood something simple. "You're just the one who's here." He walked out. I didn't move for a long time. After my shift ended, I went into the office and pulled archived footage from the past month. The DVR update had finished, so everything was backed up. I checked the nights I'd been off. Sunday, Thursday, 2:15 a.m. Headlights, same car. He parked in the same spot each time. He never entered the store. He stood outside the building, sometimes near the trash, sometimes near the side door, once directly under the overhang, staring through the front windows. He stayed between 20 and 30 minutes every time, always between 2:15 and 2:45, even when I wasn't there, even when different clerks worked. He wasn't tracking my schedule. He was tracking that time, and I just happened to be the one behind the counter most of those nights. I went back further in the footage. Before I started working, overnights. Same car, same time, parked, waiting. The first timestamp I found was from 2 months before I was hired, 2:19 a.m. The store was closed for renovations that week, lights off, doors locked. He was still there, standing in the dark parking lot, looking at the building, like something inside it mattered, and it was never me. If you enjoy slow, unsettling horror stories, consider liking the video and subscribing. The car that never needed gas. The first thing I noticed was how evenly the car parked. It wasn't crooked. It wasn't rushed. It always stopped with the front tire lined up exactly with the faded yellow stripe at pump 4. Same distance from the curb, same angle, like someone had measured it once and decided that was correct. The first night I saw it, I didn't think much about it. It was 1:53 a.m. I was halfway through my shift, leaning against the coffee station, watching the security monitor cycle through the camera feeds. The lot was mostly empty. A delivery truck had left about 20 minutes earlier. The highway beyond the station hummed low and steady, but there wasn't much traffic. The sedan pulled in without using its turn signal. Dark gray, clean, not new, not old. It rolled up to pump 4 and stopped. The engine stayed running. The driver didn't get out. That happens sometimes. People check their phones. They finish a call. They sit and think. Overnight shifts are full of people who don't want to go home yet. I gave it a few minutes. 5, 10. At 15 minutes, I checked the pump status on the register screen. Pump 4 showed idle. No card inserted, no transaction started. The car stayed there for 23 minutes. I remember that number because I checked the clock twice. At 2:16 a.m., the brake lights flared briefly, and the car pulled away. No gas pumped. No one came inside. I forgot about it until the next night. 1:52 a.m. Headlights turned into the lot. Same sedan, same pump, same careful alignment. This time I watched from the front window instead of the camera monitor. The windshield was tinted just dark enough that I couldn't see the driver clearly. I could make out the shape of someone sitting upright, hands low, probably resting near the steering wheel. No movement beyond that. 20 minutes passed. Then the car left at 2:15 a.m. Exactly. By the fourth night, I started writing the time down on a receipt and keeping it in my pocket. 1:51 arrival, 2:14 departure. It varied by a minute or two, but it was always around 20 minutes. Always pump 4. They never stepped out, never opened a window, never turned on interior lights. It felt less like someone hesitating and more like someone completing a task. I told my coworker about it during a shift change. Probably waiting on someone, she said. Drug deal or something. Then why not park in the back? I asked. She shrugged. People are weird. That was reasonable. Still, I started paying attention to pump 4 more than the others. On the 6th night, while the sedan was sitting there, I glanced down at the register screen out of habit. Pump 4 showed active. I frowned. There was no card authorization beep. I hadn't approved anything. No one had lifted the nozzle. The display read $18.47. It climbed. $21.03. $24.10. My first thought was a glitch. I tapped into the pump control screen. It showed fuel dispensing, but the live camera feed clearly showed the hose still hanging in its cradle. No movement, no one outside the car. The numbers kept rising, $31.78. I felt heat creep into my face, not panic exactly, just confusion that didn't fit into anything logical. I stepped outside. The air was cold and dry. It was quiet enough that I could hear the faint electrical hum from the canopy lights. The car engine idled steadily. I walked toward pump 4 slowly, not wanting to look confrontational. The digital display on the pump read $0.00. The screen inside said $38.12. I stopped about 6 feet from the driver's window. I couldn't see the person clearly, just the outline of a head facing forward. The fuel hose hadn't moved. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. The numbers inside stopped climbing at $42.63. The car's brake lights came on. The sedan pulled away smoothly and exited the lot. I went back inside and stared at the register screen. The transaction was still open. No payment method attached, no card number. Just a completed fuel amount, $42.63. I voided it, assuming it was some kind of system error. We'd had stranger glitches before. The next night, it happened again. Arrival, 1:53 a.m., car parked, driver still. At 2:02 a.m., pump 4 showed active. This time, I didn't go outside. I stayed behind the counter and watched the numbers climb. $12.09, $27.44, $56.02. The hose never moved. When the car left at 2:17, the total stopped at $63.88. I didn't void it right away. I printed the pump log instead. The log showed pump 4 dispensing fuel at normal flow rate for 15 minutes. But there was no record of nozzle lift, no card swipe, no cash prepay, just fuel flowing. My manager came in around 6:30 a.m. I showed him the logs. He looked annoyed more than concerned. "Probably a sensor issue," he said. "These pumps are old." "But there's no missing fuel," I said. "The tank levels didn't drop that much." He gave me a look like I was overthinking it. "Inventory's off all the time by a few gallons. Don't stress." That should have ended it. But over the next 2 weeks, pump 4 dispensed fuel every single night between 2 and 2:20 a.m. The totals varied. Some nights $25, some nights over $100. The cumulative amount crossed $3,000 by the end of the month. There was no corresponding inventory shortage. That was the part that kept me up during the day. If fuel was actually being pumped, it had to go somewhere. But the underground tank readings were stable within normal variance. It was like the system believed fuel was moving. But nothing physical changed. One night I decided to test something. At 1:45 a.m., before the sedan arrived, I disabled pump 4 from the control panel. Fully offline. The screen confirmed, out of service. At 1:52, the sedan pulled in. It parked at pump 4 anyway. I watched the driver's silhouette through the window. They didn't react to the out of service sign. At 2:03 a.m., the register screen beeped softly. Pump 4, active. I stared at the screen. It should have been impossible. The pump outside still displayed out of service in red letters, but inside the dollar amount started rising. $9.14, $19.52. I felt something shift in my chest then. Not fear, not exactly. More like understanding that I wasn't looking at a mechanical issue. I walked outside again. The night felt heavier than usual. No wind, no highway noise for a stretch of seconds that felt too long. The pump display still showed out of service. The hose hadn't moved. The car idled. I stepped closer than before, close enough to see faint reflections in the tinted glass. For a second, I thought I saw someone in the passenger seat too. Not moving, just shapes. The total inside reached $78.33. The car's engine revved slightly. Then it drove away. The pump inside stopped counting at $80 exactly. That was the only round number I'd seen. I didn't void the transaction. I left it open. The next morning, corporate called. They wanted to know why Pump 4 had dispensed over $5,000 in the last 6 weeks without payment records. I didn't have an answer. They pulled the surveillance remotely. Later that afternoon, my manager called me. His voice was different. "Corporate says the footage shows the hose extended each night," he said. "It's not," I told him. "I was standing there. They're saying it is. Every night. Hose out. Fueling." "That's not true." There was a long pause. "They're sending someone to inspect." The inspector came 2 days later during my shift. We stood outside at 1:50 a.m., waiting. When the sedan pulled in, he folded his arms. "Watch," he said. We both looked at pump 4. The driver stayed inside. The hose did not move. At 2:04 a.m., the register inside beeped. I didn't take my eyes off the pump. The inspector leaned forward slightly. "You see that?" he asked quietly. I did. The hose hadn't lifted, but the fuel meter on the pump face, normally dark until activation, glowed faintly. The numbers weren't visible, just the backlight, as if something had triggered it from inside. We went back in to check the register. $14.77, climbing. The inspector didn't say anything for a while. At 2:18 a.m., the car left. The total stopped at $92.11. He checked the underground tank monitor, levels unchanged. He looked at me differently after that. Not suspicious, not skeptical, just unsettled. Before he left, he said something I still think about. "The system thinks it's pumping," he said, "but nothing here is losing fuel." "Then what is?" I asked. He didn't answer. The sedan still comes some nights, not every night anymore. Always pump 4, always around 2 in the morning. I stopped checking the totals after a while. Last week, I looked at the cumulative report out of habit. Pump 4 has dispensed over $18,000 in fuel this year. Inventory still balances. Nothing missing. Sometimes when the lot is quiet and the car is sitting there, I stand by the window and try to see through the tint. I don't focus on the driver anymore. I watch the space around the car, because whatever is being fueled doesn't seem connected to the pump, and it doesn't seem to need the hose. The man in the back hallway. The first time I heard the stockroom door open, I thought it was the air pressure shifting. It was a soft sound, not a bang, just the slow release of a latch and the quiet drag of metal over tile. I was restocking cigarettes behind the counter at 2:37 a.m. The store was empty. The soda coolers hummed. The overhead lights made everything look flatter than it should. I remember thinking the air felt colder than usual, like the heat had dipped for a second. The stockroom door was in the back hallway near the employee restroom. No one had access to it but me and the manager. It stayed locked automatically. Heavy door, industrial handle. I stood still and listened. Nothing followed the sound. No footsteps, no boxes shifting, no second latch. I walked down the hallway slowly, not in a rush. The tile felt louder under my shoes than it normally did. The door was closed. The handle was still. I tested it. Locked. I told myself it was the building settling. These places make noise at night. Ductwork expands. Ice machines click. You learn to filter it out. But I noticed it again the next night. Same time, within a few minutes of 2:30. The latch sound. Then silence. This time I didn't go back there right away. I stood behind the counter and counted to 30. Nothing else. When I checked the hallway, the door was shut and locked again. I mentioned it to my manager the next morning. He didn't look concerned. "Probably the seal sticking," he said. "No one's got access besides us." "There's no alarm trigger," I said. "If it was open, we'd know." That made sense. Still, I started watching the hallway camera more closely during my shift. The camera angle wasn't great. It caught the hallway from above, slightly off-center. You could see the stockroom door, but not the entire frame. 3 nights later, at 2:34 a.m., I was watching the monitor when the door handle moved. Just slightly. Not enough to swing open, just enough to shift. I leaned closer to the screen. The latch depressed slowly, like someone turning it carefully. Then the door opened inward about 6 inches. I felt my body go very still. No one stepped out. The opening stayed there for maybe 4 seconds. Then it closed. The handle returned to its resting position. I walked back immediately, heart steady but tight. The hallway felt longer than usual. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. When I reached the door, it was shut, locked. I unlocked it with my key. The stockroom was exactly as I'd left it. Shelves, cleaning supplies, boxes of cups. No one inside. No second exit. No ceiling access. No space big enough to hide in without moving something. I checked inventory the next morning. Nothing missing. For a week, the door didn't move again. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the handle shift. Then, at 2:29 a.m. on a Tuesday, I heard it clearly behind me while I was counting the drawer. The slow pull of the door opening. I didn't turn around immediately. I waited. I listened. There was a soft step. Not loud, not hurried, just one foot on tile. Then, nothing. I walked down the hallway slower this time. The door was open about a foot. The lights inside the stockroom were off. I stood there for a second before switching them on. The room was empty, but the air felt different, slightly warmer than the hallway. I don't know how else to describe it. Not hot, just occupied. I locked it again and went back to the counter. That was when I decided to put my own camera up. Nothing official, just a small motion camera I ordered online. I mounted it in the corner of the hallway above eye level, angled directly at the stockroom door. I didn't tell my manager. The first 2 nights, nothing happened. On the third night at 2:31 a.m., I heard the latch. I didn't move. I let the camera record. I finished counting the drawer. I wiped down the counter. I waited until 3 o'clock before checking the footage on my phone. The video started at 2:30:58. The hallway was empty. At 2:31:12, the handle turned. The door opened about 8 inches. I leaned closer to my screen. Something stepped forward, not fully into the hallway, just halfway. A shoulder, part of a torso. It looked like a man wearing a dark shirt. He didn't rush, didn't look around. He stepped just far enough that his arm and half his chest were visible in the frame. Then he stopped. He stood there for 22 seconds, not moving, just occupying the doorway. Then he stepped backward. The door closed. I replayed it 3 times. The camera had clear resolution, no glitch, no distortion. I went down the hallway immediately and unlocked the stockroom. Empty. No footprints, no disturbed boxes, no second person. I checked the ceiling tiles. Solid. The next morning, I showed the footage to my manager. He watched it twice. "That's not possible," he said quietly. "I know. There's nowhere to stand behind that door." We both knew the layout. The shelving ran tight along that wall. There was less than a foot of clearance between the door and the first rack. No space for a person to stand flat against it. That night, I stayed later than usual, 2:28 a.m. The store felt heavier than before, quieter. Even the hum of the refrigerators seemed lower. At 2:32, the latch turned. I didn't look at the camera this time. I walked straight to the hallway. The door was already open, halfway, and someone was standing there, only halfway visible. A shoulder, a chest, the rest hidden by the door. He wasn't facing me directly, more angled toward the counter area, like he had been watching from inside. I stopped about 10 feet away. Neither of us moved. The fluorescent light flickered once overhead. I became aware of how narrow the hallway felt, how close the walls seemed. The air didn't feel warmer anymore. It felt contained. After maybe 15 seconds, he stepped backward. The door closed slowly. I waited another 10 before unlocking it. The stockroom was empty, exactly as it had been every other time. I quit 2 weeks later. I still drive past that station sometimes on my way home from my new job. Pump lights on, front windows glowing. Everything looks normal, but every time I pass, I think about the footage, not the part where he stepped out, the part where he stood there, because he never looked lost. He looked like he was checking something, and the space behind that door has never made sense to me since. It feels deeper than it should be, like the building has more room than the floor plan allows. And sometimes when I think about it too long, I can still hear that latch turning. Slowly, from the inside,